Today, the latest weapons, coupled with the fighting skill of the American soldier, stand ready, on the alert all over the world to defend this country, you, the American people, against aggression. This is The Big Picture, an official television report to the nation from the United States Army. Now, to show you part of the big picture, here is Sergeant Stuart Queen.
At Camp Irwin, in the vast Mohave Desert of Southern California, is located the Armored Combat Training Center. To this military installation, certain selected units are sent for an intensive 6-week course in tank firing and maneuvering. The men come here, usually, with only their basic training behind them. They leave as full-fledged tankers. To give you an idea of what it takes to make a tanker in our modern Army, we have recorded some of the highlights of this training cycle. Last summer, our big picture camera followed a typical trainee from the time he arrived at Camp Irwin until the day he finished the course. This is his story.
Dear Mom and Dad, boy, what a place. We arrived at Barstow at 9 a.m., 0900 hours, according to the Army's way of telling time. The day was bright and sunny, and you could see for miles in this clear desert air. We were loaded onto our buses right there at the station. Then we took off for Camp Irwin, about 35 miles away. It's a little hard to describe this country if you've never seen it. Certainly, it's not like anything you've ever seen in Kentucky. This is called the Mohave Desert, but it isn't really desert. There are quite a few bushes, mesquite and creosote bushes, and even a few Joshua trees. Coming over a hill, we caught our first sight of Bicycle Dry Lake. And off to the right, surrounded by a rim of low mountains, was Camp Irwin. Here at Camp Irwin is what they call the Armored Combat Training Center. The main job of the center is to train tank crews to fire and maneuver under conditions which they might expect to find in actual combat. Camp Irwin's great advantage as a training area is its size. The 750,000-acre firing range makes it possible for tanks to fire and maneuver without restriction. Our training started the day we arrived. As soon as we got settled in our barracks, we were marched off to the service club to listen to an orientation lecture given by the post commandant, Colonel Holmes. He told us something of the history of the camp, the weather, the things to see in the surrounding area, and, of course, the reason we were here. Then we were taken out to gunnery range number 3, where we were given sort of a preview of our next 6 weeks. We don't do much marching out here. They cart us around in open buses to save time. First, we heard a lecture by one of the instructors, telling us what sort of training to expect. And it sounded kind of rugged, I must say. Then, when they finished telling us what it would be like, they started showing us. We double-timed across to the firing range, where they had some bleachers set up. In front of the bleachers, they had a line of tanks. They wanted us to hear what a tank gun sounds like when it fires. But first, they gave us a demonstration of what not to do around a tank. They had these jokers pretending to be a tank crew, and the way they handled that ammo was a caution. I guess we can do better than those guys. Next, they started firing. And I want to tell you that high-velocity 90mm gun they have on these M48s really makes a noise. It sure is no firecracker. The next thing we had to do was learn something about these steel monsters we were going to live with for the next 6 weeks. We had to learn what made them go and what made them stop. We had to learn everything from checking the oil in the engine to checking the tracks and suspension system. One instructor showed us how to traverse the turret manually and how to elevate the gun. Another instructor explained some of the more important facts about our engines. It all sounded pretty complicated. Then we learned how to make certain necessary repairs out in the field when there was no shop available. Such things as taking off a tread and putting it on again. They call this method of making repairs a field expedient. By now, we were ready for our first class, using the new rangefinder. They have a special building for this class, with the rangefinders set up in windows, looking out over a sighting range where several targets have been placed at carefully measured distances. Our job was to look through the rangefinder and estimate the distance to a target. Accurate range estimation is very important for a tanker, and you'd be surprised how easy it is to misjudge distances. This rangefinder gets rid of a lot of guesswork. Our next class was on the caliber 30 machine gun. In these classes, they divide us up into small groups so we can follow on our own weapon what the instructor is demonstrating. Then we were given a familiarization course on a tank turret trainer. This mock-up was the same size and had the same equipment as a regular turret on an M48 tank. The only difference was that it was cut away, so an instructor on the outside could see what you were doing inside. Our next class was communications. They call radio the voice of armor, and it really is. When you're in the field, about the only way one tank can communicate with another is by radio. So this was a subject everybody had to master. When we finished this part of the course, we got our first breather. We went over to a place about 30 miles from here called Scotty's Castle. This castle was built by an eccentric millionaire on the edge of Death Valley, where about 60 years ago, the 20 mule teams used to haul out great wagons full of borax. The rock formations around here make you think you're on the moon. It certainly seems strange to find a place like the castle sitting out here in the middle of nowhere. The next day, of course, it was back to work. We went out to a place called the Rock Pile for a lecture and demonstration on the tank flamethrower. Then in the same area, we had our first platoon tactical problem. As usual, we were carefully briefed on what was expected of us. Now the long weeks of training began to pay off. Everybody knew his job and did it. Our platoon discovered that we were able to work very well together as a team. Our mission was to attack a certain area which was supposed to contain enemy fortifications. In all these problems, we were assumed to be working with the infantry. We moved into position and opened fire. When we reduced the enemy's fortifications, we moved in for the kill. Fire and maneuver. That's the basic principle we're taught to follow in all tank actions. Our next problem was a night problem. We moved out at about 2000 hours. A green flare was the signal to commence firing. Ever since Korea, the Army has put more and more emphasis on training for night fighting. Our next problem involved our entire company. After our briefing, we stocked up on ammo and set out for Nelson Pass one morning just after sunrise. All 3 platoons in our company were engaged in this exercise. Our instructors went along in jeeps to observe and grade us. This was our last tactical problem before graduation, so we all wanted to make as good a showing as possible. Strong enemy forces were supposed to be occupying Nelson Pass, and our job was to move up and drive them out. A lot of high brass was watching from an observation post. A plane came in and laid down a smoke screen over the enemy position. We got the signal to move out. Our platoon headed for the pass. As we moved forward, one of the other platoons set up a base of fire and covered our advance. we all joined together to move in on the final assault. The enemy was driven off. Our mission was accomplished. The exercise was over. Lieutenant General Young, commanding general of the 6th Army, was very well pleased by our performance. He said he was delighted to welcome us to the growing ranks of combat-ready tankers who have been produced by the Armored Combat Training Center. We felt pretty good, too. While these last 6 weeks have been kind of rough, I don't think I've ever learned as much in as short a time. And wherever I go, I'm sure the training I've had here at Camp Irwin will be a great help to me. Well, this is probably my last letter from the Mohave Desert. We're leaving for our new assignment in a couple of days. Until I see you then, I remain your loving son, John.
When our men have completed this course at the Armored Combat Training Center, I think you will agree that they are well equipped to play their full role in the Army's overall mission. This is Sergeant Stuart Queen, inviting you to be with us again next week for another look at your Army in action on The Big Picture.
The Big Picture is a weekly television report to the nation on the activities of the Army at home and overseas. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center, presented by the United States Army in cooperation with this station. You too can be an important part of the big picture. You can proudly serve with the best equipped, the best trained, the best fighting team in the world today, the United States Army.